The email notification chimed at exactly 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that would forever divide my life into before and after. Subject line: Congratulations, Executive Director position. My hands trembled as I opened it, reading the words that made my heart skip 3 beats in succession. Not only had I gotten the job, but I was starting Monday, 5 days from now. And the company I'd be leading? The same marketing firm where my sister Charlotte had worked for the past 4 years. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Stella Richardson, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of how family betrayal led to the most uncomfortable Monday morning meeting of my entire career. But let me back up, because the real story starts 3 weeks earlier, when I thought my sister actually cared about my success. The phone call came on a Wednesday evening. I was in my cramped studio apartment in downtown Seattle, updating my resume for what felt like the 100th time in 6 months. The job market had been brutal since my last position ended when the startup I worked for folded overnight. 27 years old, marketing degree from University of Washington, 5 years of experience, and I was living on instant ramen and false hope. Stella, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. Charlotte's voice practically vibrated through the phone. She sounded breathless, excited, like she'd just won the lottery. There's an opening at my company, Executive Director of Strategic Marketing. It's perfect for you. Literally perfect. I set down my laptop, suddenly alert. Charlotte worked at Morrison & Associates, one of the most prestigious marketing firms in the Pacific Northwest. Getting a foot in the door there would change everything. Are you serious? What's the position exactly? It's heading up the entire strategic marketing division. Big budget, creative control, amazing salary. The current director is moving to New York to start his own agency. They need someone with fresh ideas and solid experience. She paused dramatically. Someone like you. My pulse quickened. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been dreaming about. Strategic marketing was my specialty, and I'd been doing it at a high level even at smaller companies. When are they looking to fill it? Soon. Like, really soon. They want to interview candidates next week. But here's the thing, Stella. I already talked to my manager about you. Drop your name, mention your background. She seemed interested. I felt a surge of gratitude so strong it nearly brought tears to my eyes. Charlotte and I had been through our ups and downs over the years, but this felt like genuine sisterly support. Charlotte, I can't thank you enough. This could change my entire trajectory. That's what family is for, right? But listen, you need to be strategic about this. The company culture here is very specific, professional but approachable, confident but not arrogant. If you come across too eager or desperate, it'll backfire. I grabbed a notebook, ready to take notes. Tell me everything. What should I know? For the next 45 minutes, Charlotte walked me through what she claimed was insider knowledge about Morrison & Associates. The management team, their recent projects, their preferred communication style, even details about the office layout, and company traditions. She told me about their quarterly innovation challenges, their client retention strategies, and their expansion plans for the coming year. The key, she said, is showing them you understand their vision without seeming like you're trying too hard to fit in. They value authenticity above everything else. And whatever you do, don't mention the Peterson account disaster from last year. It's still a sore spot. I scribbled notes frantically. Peterson account. Got it. What happened there? Long story. But basically the previous strategic director made some questionable choices that cost them a major client. They're still recovering from that reputation hit. If you can position yourself as someone who learns from others' mistakes rather than someone who might repeat them, that's gold. The more she talked, the more confident I felt. Having insider information felt like having a roadmap to success. Charlotte seemed genuinely invested in helping me succeed, offering specific examples of projects I should reference and people I should mention knowing about. "There's one more thing," she said as our call was winding down. "The interview process is pretty intense. Multiple rounds, different departments. But if you make it through, the rewards are incredible. Full benefits, stock options, creative freedom, and the salary range starts at 6 figures. 6 figures. I hadn't made that kind of money since, well, ever. My last job had respectable but not life-changing money. This position could mean financial stability, creative fulfillment, and career advancement all at once. Charlotte, seriously, I owe you big time for this. How can I ever repay you?" She laughed, but there was something in the sound that I couldn't quite identify. "Just nail the interview and remember me when you're running the place." The application process moved faster than I'd expected. By Friday, I had submitted my portfolio, references, and a custom cover letter tailored specifically to Morrison and Associates' brand voice and recent campaigns. By Monday, they called to schedule a first-round interview for Thursday. I spent the entire week preparing. I researched every member of their leadership team, studied their client portfolio, analyzed their recent marketing campaigns, and even drove by their office building to get a feel for the neighborhood. I bought a new interview suit with money I probably shouldn't have spent, but Charlotte had emphasized how much appearance mattered in their corporate culture. The night before the interview, Charlotte called again. "How are you feeling? Ready? For tomorrow?" "As ready as I can be. I've been practicing my responses to standard questions, and I feel good about the portfolio pieces I'm bringing. I think I can really demonstrate how my experience aligns with what they're looking for." "That's perfect. You sound confident but not cocky. That's exactly the right tone." She paused. "Actually, I have some last-minute intel that might help. I overheard some conversation today about what they're really looking for in this role." I grabbed my pen again. "What did you hear?" "They want someone who can think outside the box, but also respect established systems. Someone innovative enough to bring fresh perspectives but experienced enough not to rock the boat too hard. And apparently, they're particularly interested in candidates who have experience with crisis management and reputation repair." Crisis management and reputation repair. I had some experience with that from my previous position, when we'd had to handle a product recall situation. "That's really helpful. Anything else?" "Just remember to be yourself. You're incredibly talented, Stella. You deserve this position. Don't let imposter syndrome psych you out." Her words felt like the exact encouragement I needed. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, feeling prepared and supported. Thursday morning arrived crisp and clear. I dressed carefully in my new navy suit, minimal jewelry, professional but approachable makeup. I arrived at Morrison & Associates 15 minutes early, sitting in my car for a few minutes to collect my thoughts and review my notes one last time. The building was impressive, all glass and steel with a modern lobby featuring local artwork and sleek furniture. I checked in with the receptionist, a friendly woman named Linda who offered me coffee and made small talk about the unusually nice weather Seattle was having. "Ms. Richardson? They're ready for you now." I followed Linda down, a hallway lined with framed campaign posters and industry awards. The conference room was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. 4 people sat around a polished wooden table, and they all stood as I entered. "Stella, welcome. I'm Margaret Chen, Director of Human Resources. This is David Kim, our Chief Marketing Officer, Sarah Williams, Senior Account Manager, and Thomas Morrison, our founding partner." Thomas Morrison himself. I tried not to let my surprise show as we shook hands. Having the company founder in a first-round interview was unusual, but Charlotte had mentioned that he sometimes sat in on interviews for senior positions. "Please, have a seat. Would you like some water before we begin?" The interview started conventionally enough. They asked about my background, my experience with strategic planning, and my approach to team leadership. I felt confident in my responses, drawing on specific examples from my previous roles, and connecting them to what I knew about Morrison and Associates' client base. Then, Margaret asked a question that made my stomach drop slightly. "We're particularly interested in hearing about your experience with crisis management. Can you walk us through a time when you had to handle a reputation challenge for a client or employer?" I launched into the story about the product recall, explaining how we'd developed a comprehensive communication strategy that actually strengthened customer trust in the long run. As I spoke, I noticed Thomas Morrison taking detailed notes, nodding approvingly at certain points. "That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking we value," he said when I finished. "We've had some challenges in recent years with client relationships, and we need someone who can think proactively about reputation management." The interview continued for nearly an hour. They asked about my vision for the strategic marketing department, my thoughts on industry trends, my approach to managing creative teams. Every question felt like an opportunity to demonstrate exactly why I was the right fit for this role. As we wrapped up, David Kim leaned forward slightly. "Stella, what do you know about our company culture? What draws you specifically to Morrison and Associates?" This was my moment to use all the insider information Charlotte had provided. I talked about their innovation challenges, their client-focused approach, their reputation for creative excellence balanced with strategic rigor. I mentioned their recent expansion into digital analytics and their commitment to employee professional development. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The four interviewers exchanged glances that I interpreted as impressed. Sarah Williams smiled. "It sounds like you've done your homework." "I believe in being thorough when it comes to opportunities that really matter to me," I replied. As the interview concluded, Thomas Morrison stood and shook my hand again. "Thank you for your time today, Stella. We'll be in touch soon about next steps." Walking back to my car, I felt cautiously optimistic. The interview had gone well, possibly better than well. I'd connected with each interviewer, demonstrated relevant experience, and shown genuine enthusiasm for the role. Most importantly, I'd felt like myself throughout the conversation, confident but not arrogant, just as Charlotte had advised. I called her immediately from the parking lot. "I think it went really well. They seemed genuinely interested, and Thomas Morrison himself was there, which felt significant." "Oh, wow, Thomas was there. That's definitely a good sign. He only sits in on interviews when they're seriously considering someone." She sounded pleased. "Tell me everything." I recounted the major questions and my responses, feeling more confident with each detail I shared. Charlotte made encouraging sounds at all the right moments, celebrating my answers and reassuring me when I second-guessed myself. "You nailed it, Stella. I can tell just from how you're describing it. You should hear back within a few days about the second round." But Friday came and went with no word. Then Monday. By Tuesday, I was starting to worry that my initial optimism had been misplaced. Wednesday afternoon, my phone finally rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Stella Richardson? This is Margaret Chen from Morrison and Associates." My heart hammered as I answered. "Hi, Margaret. Thank you for calling. I wanted to personally reach out about your interview last week. I have to say, your qualifications and experience are impressive, and the team was quite taken with your strategic approach." I held my breath, waiting for the but that usually followed such statements. "However, we've decided to move forward with another candidate for this particular position. The decision was incredibly difficult, as you were definitely in our top tier of applicants." The words hit like cold water. "I see. Thank you for letting me know directly. I want to emphasize that this decision reflects the competitive nature of the position rather than any deficiency in your qualifications. We'd love to keep your information on file for future opportunities that might be an even better fit." We ended the call politely, but I felt deflated in a way that surprised me with its intensity. I'd been so certain that the interview had gone well. so confident that this was finally my break. I called Charlotte immediately, needing to process the disappointment with someone who understood how much this opportunity had meant to me. "They went with someone else," I said without preamble when she answered. "Oh no, Stella. I'm so sorry. That's incredibly disappointing. I just don't understand. The interview felt so positive. Thomas Morrison seemed genuinely interested in my experience. I thought I'd answered every question well." Charlotte was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes these things just come down to fit, or internal politics that have nothing to do with qualifications. Don't take it personally." But I was taking it personally. This rejection felt particularly stinging because it had seemed so promising, because I'd invested so much preparation and hope, because Charlotte had built it up as such a perfect opportunity. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this level of position, I found myself saying. Maybe I'm aiming too high. Don't say that. You are absolutely qualified for director-level roles. This just wasn't the right match at the right time. Her reassurance helped, but the disappointment lingered. I spent the rest of the week questioning every aspect of my interview performance, wondering what I could have done differently, what signals I might have missed. The following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after Margaret Chen's rejection call, my phone buzzed with an email notification that would change everything. The subject line made me blink twice to make sure I was reading correctly. Executive Director Position, Morrison & Associates. But this wasn't from Margaret Chen or anyone in HR. It was from Thomas Morrison directly, sent to my personal email. Address that I'd only used on my original application. "Dear Ms. Richardson," it began. "I apologize for the unconventional nature of this communication, but I wanted to reach out personally regarding a unique situation that has developed since your interview last week." The email from Thomas Morrison felt surreal, like finding a winning lottery ticket in yesterday's newspaper. I read it 3 times before the words were fully registered. "Dear Ms. Richardson, I apologize for the unconventional nature of this communication, but I wanted to reach out personally regarding a unique situation that has developed since your interview last week. We've recently discovered some concerning information about our internal hiring process that directly impacts your candidacy. Would you be available for a confidential phone conversation today at your earliest convenience? This matter requires immediate attention. Regards, Thomas Morrison." My hands shook as I dialed the number he'd provided. Thomas answered on the first ring, his voice grave and professional. "Stella, thank you for calling so quickly. What I'm about to share with you is both uncomfortable and necessary. During our routine post-interview process, we discovered that someone within our organization provided false information about your candidacy to our hiring committee." I felt the world tilt slightly. "False information? What kind of false information?" "Someone reported that you had made disparaging comments about our company culture during your interview, specifically about our crisis management practices and our handling of the Peterson account situation. They claimed you had described our approach as outdated and reactive and suggested that our recent client losses were due to poor strategic leadership." The blood drained from my face. "Mr. Morrison, I never said anything like that. In fact, I specifically avoided discussing the Peterson account because I was told it was a sensitive topic. I would never make those kinds of comments in an interview. I believe you, Stella, which is why I requested the interview recordings. We record all senior-level interviews for quality assurance purposes, though we don't typically review them unless there's a discrepancy." My heart was racing now. "And what did the recordings show?" "They showed exactly what I suspected. Your interview was professional, respectful, and thoroughly impressive. You never made any of the comments that were reported to us. In fact, when asked about crisis management, you spoke positively about learning from challenges and building stronger client relationships through transparency." Relief flooded through me, immediately followed by a cold realization. Someone deliberately lied about what I said during the interview? That's correct. And when we traced the source of this misinformation, we discovered it came from someone who had access to your application materials and interview schedule. Someone who would have known exactly what false claims would be most damaging to your candidacy. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Someone on the inside. Yes? Someone who knew that referencing the Peterson account would be particularly problematic, since we specifically avoid discussing that situation with external candidates. Only our internal team knows the details of what happened there. I sank into my desk chair, the implications washing over me. Mr. Morrison, can I ask who provided this false information? There was a long pause. I think you already know, Stella. Your sister Charlotte Williams submitted a formal report claiming these statements came directly from your interview responses. She presented it as a concerned employee looking out for the company's best interests. The world went silent. Charlotte Williams. My sister Charlotte, who had been so encouraging, so supportive, so invested in my success. Charlotte, who had fed me insider information and coached me through the entire process. Charlotte, who had deliberately sabotaged my candidacy with lies. I don't understand, I whispered, though part of me was beginning to understand all too well. Neither did we, initially, but when we confronted Charlotte about the discrepancy between her report and the actual interview recordings, she became defensive and eventually admitted that she had concerns about hiring family members. She claimed she was protecting the company from potential nepotism issues. My mind reeled back through our conversations. Every piece of advice she'd given me, every detail about company culture, every warning about what not to say. Had any of it been genuine help, or had it all been part of some elaborate setup? Mr. Morrison, I need to ask you something directly. Did Charlotte actually recommend me for this position, or was that part of the lie too? Another pause. Stella, Charlotte never recommended you for anything. In fact, when your application came through our normal channels, she specifically requested that her relationship to you be noted in your file. She expressed concerns about your stability and professional judgment based on what she described as recent career struggles. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Not only had Charlotte not helped me get this interview, she had actively tried to prevent me from getting it. And when that hadn't worked, she had resorted to outright lies to sabotage my chances. I'm so sorry you're learning about this in such a painful way, Thomas continued. But I felt you deserved to know the truth about what happened. Your interview was genuinely excellent, and the decision to reject you was based entirely on false information. I tried to process what this meant. So, the position is yours if you want it, Stella. We're rescinding our offer to the other candidate, who frankly wasn't nearly as qualified as you are. We were only swayed by the supposed character concerns that Charlotte raised. I should have felt elated. This was everything I'd wanted, the opportunity that could change my career trajectory. But instead, I felt hollow, betrayed in a way that cut deeper than any professional disappointment. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate this more than you know, but I have to ask, what happens to Charlotte? She's my sister, but what she did was a serious breach of professional ethics and company policy. We're still determining the appropriate disciplinary action, but I wanted to resolve your situation first. Her employment status will be addressed separately. We arranged for me to come in the following Monday to sign paperwork and begin the onboarding process. As I hung up the phone, I sat in my empty apartment trying to reconcile the sister I thought I knew with the person who had orchestrated this betrayal. The worst part wasn't even the professional sabotage. It was remembering how grateful I'd felt, how I'd thanked her repeatedly for her support, how I'd promised to remember her when I was running the place. She had listened to my gratitude, knowing she was actively working to destroy my chances. I needed answers, but I also needed time to think. The idea of confronting Charlotte while I was this angry and hurt seemed unwise. Instead, I spent the evening going through our recent conversations, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that might explain her motivation. Charlotte had always been competitive, even as kids. She was 3 years older and had consistently excelled in school, sports, and social situations. I'd looked up to her, tried to follow in her footsteps, and sometimes that had annoyed her. But this level of betrayal seemed extreme even for sibling rivalry. Then I remembered something she'd said during one of our conversations about Morrison and Associates. She'd mentioned being passed over for a promotion recently, something about the company bringing in outside talent instead of promoting from within. Had she been hoping for the strategic director position herself? I called my cousin Jessica, who had always been close to both Charlotte and me. If anyone would have insight into Charlotte's mindset, it would be her. "Stella, I've been wondering when you'd call," Jessica said without preamble. "Charlotte told me about the interview, but something about the way she talked about it didn't sit right with me." "What do you mean?" "She kept saying things like, Stella thinks she can just waltz into a senior position, and some people need to learn that family connections don't guarantee success. It was weird because she was the one who told you about the job in the first place." My suspicions were confirmed. "Jessica, Charlotte didn't just discourage my candidacy. She actively sabotaged it with lies." I explained the entire situation, from Thomas Morrison's call to the discovery of Charlotte's false report. Jessica listened in growing dismay. "Oh my God, Stella. I knew she was jealous, but I never thought she'd do something this deliberate and cruel." "Jealous of what? She has a stable job, her own apartment, and a successful career. What does she have to be jealous about? You really don't see it, do you?" Jessica's voice was gentle but firm. "Stella, you've always been the creative one, the risk taker, the one who goes after what she wants. Charlotte plays it safe, follows the rules, stays in her lane. And despite all your recent struggles, you were about to leap over her in the, corporate hierarchy at her own company." The pieces were starting to form a clearer picture. Charlotte had probably applied for the strategic director position herself and been rejected. Then I had come along, the younger sister with the supposedly inferior career, and threatened to get the job she wanted. But Jessica, if she wanted the position, why didn't she just tell me? I would never have applied to compete against my own sister. Because she knew you were more qualified, and she couldn't stand admitting that. It was easier to sabotage you than to compete fairly and risk losing. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Charlotte immediately, not while my emotions were so raw. Instead, I was going to take the job, do it exceptionally well, and let my success speak for itself. Whatever consequences Charlotte faced at Morrison and Associates would be the result of her own choices, not my revenge. But I also wasn't going to pretend this hadn't happened. Our relationship had been fundamentally altered by her betrayal, and there would need to be a reckoning eventually. Over the weekend, I prepared for my new role with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The position itself was everything I'd hoped for, but starting as Charlotte's new boss created a dynamic I'd never anticipated dealing with. I researched the strategic marketing team I'd be inheriting, including Charlotte's role as a mid-level account coordinator. According to the organizational chart, she would report to me through one layer of management, which meant our professional interactions would be inevitable, but not daily. Sunday evening, my phone rang. Charlotte's name appeared on the screen, and after several rings, I decided to answer. "Stella, I heard some crazy rumors at work on Friday," she said without greeting. Her voice sounded strained, artificial. "Something about you getting the director position after all?" I kept my voice neutral. "It's not a rumor. I start Monday." "But how is that possible? Margaret Chen told you they went with someone else." "Things changed, Charlotte. The company discovered some new information that affected their decision." There was a long silence. "What kind of new information?" "I think you know exactly what kind of information." Another silence, longer this time. When Charlotte spoke again, her voice had shifted to something harder, more defensive. Look, Stella, I hope you understand that my loyalty has to be to my employer first. If I had concerns about a candidate's suitability, it was my professional obligation to share those concerns. Your concerns were lies, Charlotte. They have recordings of my interview. They know you made up everything you reported. I heard her sharp intake of breath. I don't know what you think you know, but I know that you never recommended me for this position. I know that you tried to prevent them from considering me at all. I know that when that didn't work, you filed a false report claiming I'd made disparaging comments during my interview. I know all of it, Charlotte. The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. You always land on your feet, don't you, Stella? Always find a way to come out on top, even when you don't deserve it. Even when I don't deserve it? Charlotte, I earned this position with my qualifications and my interview performance. You tried to steal it from me with lies. You want to know the truth? Her voice rose slightly. I've been at that company for 4 years. 4 years of proving myself, building relationships, exceeding expectations. And they were ready to hand a director position to someone who's been unemployed for 6 months just because she gave a good interview. So you sabotaged me. I protected my company from making a hiring mistake based on a single conversation. The audacity of her rationalization left me speechless. She genuinely seemed to believe that her lies had been justified, that my success was somehow illegitimate. Charlotte, we're going to be working at the same company now. How do you want to handle that? Professionally, she said curtly. I'm sure you'll find that I'm a dedicated employee who puts the company's interests first. Yes, I replied. I'm beginning to understand exactly how you put the company's interests first. We hung up without saying goodbye, and I knew that whatever relationship we'd had as sisters had been irreparably damaged. But I also knew that I was about to walk into my new role with a clear understanding of at least one person I couldn't trust. Monday morning was going to be very interesting indeed. Monday morning arrived with Seattle's typical drizzle, but I felt electric with nervous energy. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a charcoal gray blazer with matching pants, professional but approachable, authoritative without being intimidating. As I walked through the glass doors of Morrison & Associates at exactly 8:30 a.m., I carried myself like someone who belonged in the executive suite. The lobby felt different now that I was seeing it as an employee rather than a hopeful candidate. Linda, the receptionist who had been so kind during my interview, beamed when she saw me. Ms. Richardson, congratulations on your new position. Mr. Morrison asked me to send you straight up to the executive floor when you arrived. The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave me a moment to center myself. In a few hours, I would be meeting with my new team, including Charlotte. But first, I had orientation meetings, paperwork, and strategic planning sessions with the senior leadership team. Thomas Morrison's office was a corner suite with panoramic views of Elliott Bay. He stood as I entered, extending his hand with a warm smile that seemed genuinely pleased. Stella, welcome to Morrison & Associates. I trust you're ready to hit the ground running? Absolutely. I've been reviewing the strategic marketing portfolio over the weekend, and I have some initial thoughts about direction and priorities. Excellent. Before we dive into strategy, though, I want to address the elephant in the room regarding your sister's employment here. I had been dreading this conversation but knew it was necessary. I appreciate you bringing it up directly. Charlotte has been placed on administrative review, pending a full investigation into her conduct during your hiring process. She's currently suspended with pay, while HR determines appropriate disciplinary action. I wanted you to know that this decision was made entirely separate from your hiring, and it won't affect your ability to lead the strategic marketing department. Relief washed over me. I wouldn't have to navigate the immediate awkwardness of being Charlotte's boss while she was still reeling from her failed sabotage attempt. Thank you for handling that professionally. I was concerned about the potential conflict of interest. Your sister's actions were her own choice, and the consequences are hers to face. Your role here is based entirely on your qualifications and potential contributions to our company. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing departmental budgets, client portfolios, and strategic objectives. The scope of my new responsibilities was both thrilling and daunting. I would be overseeing a team of 12 marketing professionals, managing relationships with major clients, and developing comprehensive campaigns with budgets that dwarfed anything I'd worked with previously. Margaret Chen from HR joined us for the final portion of the meeting to review company policies, benefits packages, and team management protocols. As we wrapped up, she handed me a thick folder containing personnel files for my direct reports. These are confidential profiles of your team members, including performance reviews, project histories, and professional development goals. I'd recommend reviewing them before your team meeting this afternoon. Back in my new office, a spacious corner space with modern furniture and plenty of natural light, I spread the personnel files across my desk. Each team member had detailed documentation of their skills, recent projects, and career aspirations. When I reached Charlotte's file, I hesitated before opening it. Her performance reviews painted a picture of a competent but unremarkable employee. Consistent ratings of meets expectations with occasional notes about potential for growth and could benefit from increased leadership opportunities. Her supervisor had noted that Charlotte seemed frustrated by her current role and had expressed interest in advancing to senior positions. One comment from her most recent review stood out. Charlotte has requested consideration for the strategic director role when it becomes available. While her technical skills are solid, she would benefit from developing more innovative approaches to campaign development and client relationship management. So she had been passed over for the promotion she wanted, just as I'd suspected. Reading between the lines of the corporate speak, it was clear that Charlotte was seen as reliable but not exceptional, steady but not innovative. The exact opposite of the kind of dynamic leadership they were seeking for the director position. I closed her file and focused on learning about the rest of my team. By lunchtime, I had a solid understanding of their strengths, current projects, and the departmental dynamics I'd be stepping into. The team meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main conference room. I arrived 10 minutes early to set up my presentation materials and greet team members as they arrived. One by one, I met the people I'd be working with. Marcus, the senior graphic designer with 15 years of experience. Lisa, the digital analytics specialist who had developed several innovative tracking systems. James, the copywriter whose campaigns had won industry awards. And 8 others who comprised the core of Morrison & Associates' strategic marketing division. Charlotte was notably absent, still on administrative suspension. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stella Richardson, and I'm excited to be joining Morrison & Associates as your new strategic director. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each team member. I know transitions can be challenging, and I want to be transparent about my approach to leadership and my vision for our department. I spent the next hour outlining my background, my strategic philosophy, and my initial observations about the department's strengths and opportunities for growth. The team seemed engaged, asking thoughtful questions about campaign directions, client relationships, and resource allocation. Marcus raised his hand during the Q&A portion. Can I ask about the elephant in the room? We all know about the situation with Charlotte Williams and the hiring process. How is that going to affect team dynamics? I had anticipated this question and prepared a diplomatic response. Charlotte's employment status is being handled through appropriate HR channels, and any decisions about her future with the company will be made based on company policies and professional conduct standards. My focus is on leading this team effectively and delivering exceptional results for our clients. I expect all team members to maintain professional standards and focus on our shared objectives. Lisa, the analytics specialist, leaned forward. What's your vision for the department's direction? Are you planning any major changes to our current approach? I believe in building on existing strengths while introducing fresh perspectives and innovative strategies. Over the next few weeks, I'll be conducting individual meetings with each of you to understand your current projects, professional goals, and ideas for improving our processes. Change will be strategic and collaborative, not disruptive. The meeting concluded with positive energy, and several team members approached me afterward to express their enthusiasm about the new leadership and share initial thoughts about potential improvements. As I walked back to my office, I felt confident about the team dynamics and excited about the creative possibilities ahead. The departmental budget allowed for ambitious campaigns, the client roster included several high-profile brands, and the team members seemed talented and motivated. That feeling of confidence lasted exactly until my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Hope you're enjoying your stolen job. Don't get too comfortable. See Charlotte. Even while suspended from the company, she was still trying to undermine my success with passive-aggressive messages. I screenshot the text and forwarded it to Margaret Chen with a brief note explaining the sender's identity. If Charlotte thought she could continue her harassment without consequences, she was about to learn otherwise. The rest of my first week flew by in a blur of client meetings, strategy sessions, and team building. I was assigned to lead the campaign development for Morrison & Associates' largest client, a regional retail chain planning a major brand refresh. The project would serve as my introduction to the company's most important business relationship and a test of my strategic capabilities. I threw myself into the work with an intensity that surprised even me. This wasn't just about proving my competence. It was about demonstrating that I deserved this opportunity based on merit, not manipulation or family connections. Every campaign concept, every client presentation, every strategic decision was made with the awareness that I was being evaluated not just as a new employee, but as someone whose hiring had been complicated by family drama. By Thursday of my first week, I had developed a comprehensive campaign strategy that incorporated innovative digital elements, community engagement initiatives, and data-driven targeting approaches. The client presentation was scheduled for the following Monday, and I felt confident about the creative direction and strategic framework. That evening, as I was packing up my office for the day, Margaret Chen knocked on my door. "Stella, do you have a few minutes?" "I wanted to update you on the investigation into Charlotte's conduct." I gestured for her to sit down, closing my laptop to give her my full attention. "We've completed our review of the incident, including interviews with relevant staff members and examination of all documentation related to your hiring process. Charlotte's actions constituted a clear violation of our professional conduct policies, specifically regarding truthfulness in official communications and potential conflicts of interest. What's the outcome?" "She's being terminated for cause, effective immediately. The falsification of information about a job candidate is grounds for dismissal under our ethics policies. Additionally, her failure to disclose her own interest in the position you were applying for represents a significant conflict of interest that she was obligated to report." I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that the situation was being handled appropriately, sadness about the finality of Charlotte's professional consequences, and lingering anger about her betrayal. Will she be informed that I was aware of the investigation results? She'll be notified of the termination and the reasons for it, but personnel decisions aren't typically discussed in detail with other employees, even family members. How you choose to handle your personal relationship with Charlotte is entirely up to you. After Margaret left, I sat in my office watching the city lights begin to twinkle as evening settled over Seattle. In 1 week, I had gone from unemployment to executive leadership, from professional disappointment to career breakthrough, from trusting my sister's support to discovering her betrayal. Charlotte's termination felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. She had gambled on destroying my opportunities and had instead destroyed her own. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it brought no satisfaction, only a profound sadness about what our relationship had become. My phone buzzed with another text message, this time from Jessica. "Heard through the family grapevine that you got the job after all. Mom is over the moon. Also heard Charlotte is having some kind of professional crisis, but she won't talk about it. What's going on? I stared at the message for several minutes, trying to decide how much to explain. Eventually, I typed back, "Long story. I'll call you this weekend and explain everything." Some conversations required more than text messages, and some family secrets were too complex for quick explanations. Jessica deserved to know the truth about what Charlotte had done, but I wanted to tell the story carefully and completely. As I finally left the office that night, I realized that I was no longer the same person who had walked through those glass doors just 5 days earlier. I had learned hard lessons about trust, family loyalty, and professional ethics. I had also discovered reserves of strength and resilience that I hadn't known I possessed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, client presentations, and strategic decisions. But tonight, I was simply grateful to be building a career based on my own merits, rather than navigating the wreckage of someone else's sabotage. The real test, I knew, would come when Charlotte eventually reached out to me directly. Because despite everything that had happened, she was still my sister. And eventually, we would have to find a way to coexist in the same family, even if we could no longer work for the same company. 3 weeks into my new role, I was hitting my stride in ways I hadn't expected. The retail client presentation had been a resounding success, resulting in a contract extension worth $2.8 million over 18 months. My team was responding well to my leadership style, which emphasized collaboration while maintaining clear accountability standards. I had implemented weekly innovation sessions where team members could pitch creative concepts without the pressure of immediate client applications. The professional satisfaction was intoxicating, but it was accompanied by a growing awareness that I hadn't heard from Charlotte since her termination. No angry phone calls, no guilt-laden family interventions, no dramatic confrontations in parking lots. Just silence, which somehow felt more ominous than her previous harassment. That silence ended on a Wednesday morning when my mother called, her voice tight with the particular strain that came from trying to mediate between her daughters. "Stella, honey, I need to talk to you about Charlotte. She's been staying with me since last week, and she's in a really dark place. She won't tell me exactly what happened at her job, but she says you were involved somehow." I had been dreading this conversation, knowing that eventually the family would be pulled into the aftermath of Charlotte's professional self-destruction. "Mom, it's complicated. Charlotte made some choices that had consequences for both of us. She keeps saying that you stole her job, that you used family connections to get ahead of her. But that doesn't sound like you, sweetheart. Can you help me understand what really happened?" I found myself in an impossible position. Telling my mother the complete truth would devastate her. Learning that one daughter had deliberately sabotaged the other's career with lies would shatter her faith in our family bonds. But letting Charlotte's version of events stand unchallenged felt like accepting responsibility for her mistakes. "Mom, I didn't steal anything from Charlotte. I applied for a position through normal channels, interviewed based on my qualifications, and was hired because I was the best candidate. Charlotte's termination was the result of her own professional conduct, not anything I did to her." "But she's so angry, Stella. She says you've always been jealous of her success and that you finally found a way to tear her down. She talks about you like you're an enemy instead of her sister." The irony was breathtaking. Charlotte had painted herself as the victim of my ambition when the reality was exactly the opposite. But explaining that to my mother would require detailing Charlotte's lies, her sabotage attempts, and her complete lack of remorse for nearly destroying my career. "Mom, I think Charlotte is processing a difficult situation and looking for someone to blame besides herself. I hope she gets the help she needs, but I can't take responsibility for choices she made independently." "Stella, she's family. Whatever happened between you two, surely you can work it out. You've been close your whole lives." Close. The word felt hollow now, knowing how Charlotte had really felt about me all those years. Had our relationship always been built on her sense of superiority, Her assumption that she would always be the more successful sister? When had my achievements become threats instead of sources of pride? I love Charlotte, Mom, but I can't fix something this broken by myself. She needs to take accountability for what she did before any real healing can happen. After we hung up, I sat in my office staring out at the city skyline, wrestling with guilt that I knew was irrational. I hadn't caused Charlotte's problems, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my success had somehow triggered her self-destructive behavior. Marcus knocked on my door, carrying a portfolio folder and wearing the expression of someone with good news to share. "Stella, I wanted to show you the initial mock-ups for the Thompson Industries campaign. The client loved your strategic framework, and I think we've captured exactly the visual direction you outlined." I was grateful for the distraction. I reviewed Marcus's design concepts with genuine enthusiasm. The campaign was bold, sophisticated, and perfectly aligned with the client's brand evolution goals. Working with talented people on creative projects felt like the antidote to family drama and personal complications. This is exceptional work, Marcus. The color palette creates exactly the emotional response we discussed, and the typography choices reinforce the premium positioning strategy. Thanks. It feels good to be working on campaigns that push creative boundaries again. The previous leadership was more conservative in their approach. It was the first direct comparison anyone on my team had made between my management style and my predecessors. And I found myself curious about the department's history under previous leadership. What was the team dynamic like before? I want to make sure I'm building on strengths rather than just changing things for the sake of change. Marcus sat down, clearly comfortable with the conversation. Honestly, it was pretty stagnant. Lots of safe choices, minimal risk-taking, and not much room for individual creativity. People did good work, but it wasn't inspired work. There was also some tension because several team members felt like advancement opportunities were limited. Limited. How? Favoritism, mostly. Certain people seemed to get better project assignments and more face time with senior leadership, regardless of their actual performance or contributions. I had a sinking suspicion about where this conversation was heading. Can you give me an example? Marcus hesitated, clearly weighing how much detail to share. Well, Charlotte Williams always seemed to be in consideration for promotions despite her work being pretty mediocre. People noticed that she had unusually close relationships with certain managers, and there were rumors about her lobbying behind the scenes for opportunities. The pieces were falling into place. Charlotte hadn't just been envious of my success. She had been operating in a workplace environment where her advancement had stalled despite her efforts to position herself favorably. When the strategic director position opened up, she had probably seen it as her chance to finally break through to the senior level she felt she deserved. I appreciate your honesty, Marcus. I want this team to succeed based on merit and innovation, not politics or personal relationships. That's why morale has been so much better lately. People feel like their actual contributions matter now. After Marcus left, I reflected on how Charlotte's workplace behavior might have contributed to her frustration and eventual poor judgment. If she had been passed over for promotions repeatedly, my sudden arrival as a candidate for her dream job must have felt like the ultimate insult, the unemployed younger sister stepping into the role she had been working toward for years. Understanding her motivation didn't excuse her actions, but it helped explain the intensity of her betrayal. This hadn't been a casual sibling rivalry. It had been a desperate attempt to preserve what she saw as her rightful place in the professional hierarchy. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Jessica appeared in my office doorway, looking unusually serious. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by your workplace, but I need to talk to you about Charlotte, and this conversation couldn't wait for the weekend." I gestured for her to sit down, noting the tension in her posture and the worried expression on her face. "Stella," Charlotte called me last night, and I'm genuinely concerned about her mental state. She's talking about you in ways that are honestly scary. She's convinced that you orchestrated some kind of elaborate scheme to destroy her career and steal her job. Jessica, you know me well enough to know that's not true. Of course I know it's not true. But Charlotte seems to have constructed this entire narrative where you're the villain of her story. She claims you manipulated the hiring process, lied about your qualifications, and convinced the company to fire her out of spite. I felt a chill run down my spine. What exactly did she say? She said she's going to expose the truth about what really happened. She talked about having evidence that would prove you're not qualified for your position and that the company made a mistake hiring you. Stella, I think she might be planning to do something that could hurt both of you professionally. The implications were alarming. If Charlotte was delusional enough to believe her own revised version of events, she might take actions that could damage both our reputations in the Seattle business community. Did she say what kind of evidence she thinks she has? She mentioned emails, performance reviews, and something about inconsistencies in your application materials. It sounded like she's been digging through old records trying to find anything that might discredit you. My mind raced through the possibilities. Charlotte had access to my original application materials and would know details about my resume and portfolio that she could potentially misrepresent. If she was desperate enough, she might even fabricate documents or take information out of context to support her conspiracy theories. Jessica, I need to ask you something confidential. Has Charlotte ever bent the truth about professional situations before? Not necessarily lying outright, but presenting information in misleading ways? Jessica was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing her loyalty to both cousins. There have been times when her version of workplace events didn't quite match what I heard from other sources. She tends to cast herself as the victim of office politics when things don't go her way. I think Charlotte is having difficulty accepting responsibility for her own actions, and she's created an alternative explanation that makes me responsible for her problems. What actually happened, Stella? I've only heard fragments from family members, and everyone seems to have a different understanding of the situation. For the next 20 minutes, I walked Jessica through the complete timeline. Charlotte's apparent help with my application, the successful interview, the rejection based on false reports, Thomas Morrison's investigation, and the discovery of Charlotte's lies. I showed her the threatening text messages and explained the company's decision to terminate Charlotte for ethics violations. Jessica listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled as the full scope of Charlotte's betrayal became clear. Oh my God, Stella. I knew Charlotte could be competitive, but this is sociopathic behavior. She deliberately tried to destroy your career and then convinced herself that you're the one who wronged her. The worst part is that she seems to genuinely believe her own story now. She's rewritten history in her mind to make herself the victim instead of the perpetrator. What are you going to do if she follows through on her threats to expose you? I had been wrestling with that question since Jessica's arrival. Charlotte's potential actions could range from embarrassing social media posts to formal complaints with industry organizations. If she was truly determined to discredit me, she could create significant professional complications, even if her allegations were ultimately proven false. I'm going to document everything and prepare a comprehensive defense of my qualifications and hiring process. If Charlotte wants to wage a public battle over this, I'll be ready with facts, evidence, and witness statements. But she's your sister, Stella. Is there any way to resolve this privately before it escalates further? I've tried to give her space to process what happened and come to terms with the consequences of her actions. But if she's actively planning to attack my professional reputation with lies, then I have to protect myself and my career. Jessica nodded grimly. I'll try to talk to her again, see if I can convince her to step back from whatever she's planning. But Stella, I think you should prepare for the possibility that this situation is going to get worse before it gets better. As Jessica left my office, I realized that Charlotte's professional consequences had only been the beginning of this story. Her inability to accept responsibility for her actions was driving her toward increasingly destructive behavior that could ultimately harm both of us. I spent the rest of the afternoon creating a detailed file documenting the entire hiring process, Charlotte's sabotage attempts, and the company's investigation. If Charlotte wanted to turn this into a public battle, I would be ready with evidence that definitively proved my version of events. But part of me still hoped that somewhere beneath her anger and delusion, the sister I had once trusted might find a way to step back from the precipice she was approaching, because once she crossed certain lines, there would be no path back to any kind of family relationship. The next move was Charlotte's, and I had a sinking feeling that she was going to choose the most destructive option available. The attack came on a Friday morning, precisely calculated for maximum damage and minimum opportunity for immediate response. I discovered it when Lisa, my analytics specialist, knocked urgently on my office door at 7:45 a.m., her laptop clutched against her chest and her face pale with concern. "Stella, you need to see something. It's about you, and it's already spreading on LinkedIn and industry forums." My stomach dropped as I opened her laptop to find a meticulously crafted post titled "The Truth About Nepotism and Corporate Ethics in Seattle Marketing." The author was listed as a concerned industry professional, but I recognized Charlotte's writing style immediately, the same passive-aggressive tone she'd used in family emails for years, now weaponized for professional destruction. The post was a masterpiece of carefully worded accusations designed to appear factual while remaining just vague enough to avoid obvious defamation. It detailed how an unqualified candidate had allegedly used family connections and manipulated information to secure a senior position at a respected Seattle marketing firm. The post claimed this individual had falsified credentials, misrepresented previous experience, and engaged in unethical networking practices to bypass more deserving internal candidates. "This represents everything wrong with today's hiring practices," the post concluded. "When companies prioritize personal relationships over professional competence, they betray both their employees and their clients. The marketing industry deserves better than this kind of corruption." The post included no names, but anyone in Seattle's marketing community would be able to connect the dots. Worse, it had been cross-posted to 3 major industry forums and shared by several anonymous accounts, creating the appearance of organic concern from multiple sources. "How many people have seen this?" I asked Lisa, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's been shared 47 times on LinkedIn in the past hour, and the forum posts are getting significant engagement. People are speculating about which company and which employee it's referring to." I felt the familiar chill that comes with being publicly attacked, but underneath the shock was a growing sense of determination. Charlotte had chosen to wage this battle in the professional arena, where facts and evidence mattered more than family loyalty or emotional manipulation. "Lisa, can you compile a list of everyone who's shared or commented on these posts? I need to understand the scope of what we're dealing with." "Already on it. I've also started documenting timestamps and screenshots in case any of this content gets deleted." Within an hour, Margaret Chen and Thomas Morrison were in my office, both looking grim but supportive. The company's legal counsel had been notified, and they were prepared to issue a response if the situation escalated further. "Stella, we want you to know that we stand fully behind your hiring and your performance since joining the company," Thomas said firmly. "These anonymous allegations are clearly motivated by personal grievances rather than legitimate professional concerns." Margaret added, "We've already prepared a statement defending your qualifications and character, but we wanted your input on how aggressively to respond. Sometimes engaging with this kind of attack gives it more credibility than it deserves." I had spent the morning thinking about exactly this question. Charlotte was counting on me to either remain silent, allowing her narrative to spread unchallenged, or to respond defensively in ways that would make me appear guilty or desperate. I want to respond, but strategically, not defending myself. Against baseless accusations, but proactively sharing the facts about my qualifications and hiring process. Let the evidence speak for itself. Over the weekend, I crafted a response that would reframe the entire conversation. Instead of addressing Charlotte's post directly, I published a detailed case study about my recent campaign successes at Morrison & Associates, including client testimonials, performance metrics, and team feedback. The post positioned me as a confident professional sharing insights about effective marketing strategies, rather than someone defending against attacks. Thrilled to share some early results from my first month leading strategic marketing at Morrison & Associates, my post began. The collaborative approach we've implemented has already generated exceptional client outcomes and team engagement. Here's what we've learned about building innovative campaigns in today's competitive landscape. The post included quotes from team members about improved departmental morale, specific metrics showing campaign performance improvements, and endorsements from satisfied clients. It painted a picture of competent leadership and measurable success that directly contradicted Charlotte's implications about my qualifications. The response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Industry colleagues commented with congratulations and specific praise for the campaign strategies I'd outlined. Several prominent marketing executives shared the post with their own endorsements of my professional capabilities. More importantly, the contrast between my evidence-based professional content and Charlotte's anonymous attack became stark. While she was making vague accusations from the shadows, I was publicly demonstrating my competence with concrete results and named supporters. By Monday morning, Charlotte's post had been buried by more recent content, while my case study was still generating engagement and new professional connections. She had overplayed her hand, creating a situation where her attack had actually enhanced my professional reputation rather than damaging it. But Charlotte wasn't finished. That afternoon, I received a call from David Kim, the Chief Marketing Officer, asking me to come to his office immediately. "Stella, we've received a formal complaint about your hiring process. Someone has filed a detailed allegation with the Seattle Business Ethics Council, claiming that Morrison & Associates engaged in nepotism and fraudulent hiring practices." My heart sank. The Business Ethics Council was a respected industry organization that investigated complaints about professional misconduct. While their findings weren't legally binding, a negative report could seriously damage both my reputation and the company's standing in the marketing community. What specific allegations are they making? The complaint claims that you misrepresented your qualifications during the interview process, that the company failed to properly vet your credentials, and that family connections influenced the hiring decision inappropriately. They're requesting a full investigation, including review of your application materials, interview recordings, and personnel files. I felt a surge of cold anger. Charlotte had escalated from social media attacks to formal industry complaints, but she had also made a crucial mistake. A formal investigation would require evidence, documentation, and verifiable facts, areas where the truth strongly favored my position. David, I welcome a full investigation. I'm confident that any objective review will confirm that my hiring was based entirely on merit and proper procedures. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. We'll be providing complete cooperation with the Ethics Council, including all documentation related to your hiring process and Charlotte's subsequent termination for filing false reports. The investigation process was thorough and invasive. Over the following 2 weeks, Ethics Council investigators interviewed me, my team members, Thomas Morrison, and several members of the hiring committee. They reviewed my complete employment history, verified my educational credentials, and analyzed the interview recordings in detail. They also discovered something that Charlotte probably hadn't anticipated. The Ethics Council took filing false complaints very seriously, and their investigation extended to examining the credibility and motivations of complaint filers. During my formal interview with the lead investigator, a stern woman named Patricia Holbrook, I was asked to address each of Charlotte's specific allegations point by point. "Ms. Richardson, The complaint alleges that you provided false information about your previous employment experiences. Can you respond to that claim? Every detail on my resume and in my interview responses was accurate and verifiable. I have documentation supporting all employment dates, responsibilities, and achievements. I'd be happy to provide additional verification if needed. The complaint also suggests that family connections inappropriately influenced your hiring. Can you describe your relationship to Charlotte Williams and any role it played in your application process? This was the moment I had been preparing for. Charlotte Williams is my sister, but I had no knowledge that she worked at Morrison and Associates when I applied for this position. I submitted my application through normal channels after seeing the job posting online. I learned about Charlotte's employment here only after being contacted for an interview. And can you describe any interactions you had with Ms. Williams regarding your application or interview? I detailed Charlotte's apparent support and advice, the false information she had provided about helping me get the interview, and the subsequent discovery of her sabotage attempts. I provided copies of our text conversations, including her threatening messages after my hiring. Ms. Richardson, this is quite different from the narrative presented in the formal complaint. Are you saying that Ms. Williams actively worked against your candidacy rather than supporting it? The company's investigation found that Charlotte filed false reports about my interview performance in an attempt to prevent my hiring. She was subsequently terminated for these ethics violations. Patricia Holbrook made detailed notes, her expression revealing nothing about her assessment of the competing narratives. 2 days later, I received a call that vindicated everything I had believed about the power of truth over manipulation. Ms. Richardson, this is Patricia Holbrook from the Seattle Business Ethics Council. I'm calling to inform you that our investigation has concluded, and we're preparing to issue our findings. I held my breath, knowing that this moment would determine the trajectory of my professional reputation in Seattle's marketing community. Our investigation found no evidence supporting the allegations made against you or Morrison and Associates. Your hiring appears to have followed proper procedures. Your qualifications are well documented and legitimate, and your performance since joining the company has been exemplary. Relief flooded through me, but Patricia wasn't finished. However, we did discover evidence that the complaint itself was filed using false information and misleading characterizations of the facts. The complaint filer appears to have been motivated by personal grievances rather than legitimate professional concerns. What does that mean for the public record? We'll be issuing a formal statement clearing you and Morrison and Associates of any misconduct. Additionally, we're taking disciplinary action against the individual who filed the false complaint. Filing fraudulent ethics complaints is a serious violation that undermines the integrity of our professional oversight processes. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Charlotte's attempt to destroy my career had instead created an official record of my professional integrity and competence. The Ethics Council's investigation had become an inadvertent endorsement of my qualifications and character. But more than personal vindication, I felt sadness about how far Charlotte had fallen in her quest for revenge. She had gone from professional sabotage to public attacks to filing false formal complaints, each escalation making her behavior more destructive and less defensible. That evening, Jessica called with news that confirmed my sense that Charlotte had reached a breaking point. Stella, Charlotte's been served with a cease and desist letter from the Ethics Council. She's also facing potential legal action for filing false complaints. I think she's finally starting to understand the consequences of what she's done. How is she handling it? Not well. She's alternating between rage and panic. She keeps saying that everyone is conspiring against her, that the system is rigged to protect people like you. I don't think she's capable of accepting that she brought these consequences on herself. I felt a complex mixture of relief and sorrow. Charlotte's destructive campaign had been stopped, but at the cost of any remaining possibility for our relationship to heal. She had burned bridges so thoroughly that even family bonds couldn't survive the wreckage. Jessica, I tried to handle this quietly and give her space to move on. But when she decided to attack my professional reputation publicly, I had to defend myself. I know. And honestly, everyone in the family is starting to see Charlotte's behavior for what it really is. Mom called me yesterday asking if Charlotte has always been this vindictive and she just never noticed before. As we ended the call, I reflected on how completely the situation had reversed itself. Charlotte had begun with a position of employment and family support, while I had been unemployed and uncertain about my future. Her attempts to sabotage me had cost her both her job and her family relationships, while simultaneously elevating my professional standing and proving my resilience. But victory felt hollow when it came at the expense of family bonds that had once meant everything to me. Charlotte had forced me to choose between protecting my career and preserving our relationship, and her continued attacks had made that choice inevitable. The confrontation I had been dreading finally came on a Tuesday evening in November, 3 months after Charlotte's termination and 2 weeks after the Ethics Council's vindication. I was leaving my office building when I spotted her standing by my car in the parking garage, her posture radiating the kind of desperate energy that comes from having nothing left to lose. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and an unkempt appearance that spoke to weeks of stress and sleepless nights. Her professional wardrobe had been replaced with jeans and a worn sweater, and her usually perfect hair hung limp around her shoulders. "We need to talk," she said without preamble as I approached. "Charlotte." I kept my voice neutral, my hand moving instinctively toward my phone. After months of escalating attacks, I wasn't sure what to expect from this encounter. "You destroyed my life," she continued, her voice shaking with barely contained emotion. "You took everything from me. My job, my reputation, my future. And for what? To prove that you're better than me?" I studied her face, looking for any sign of the sister I had once trusted and loved. What I saw instead was someone consumed by resentment and completely divorced from reality. "Charlotte, I didn't take anything from you. You lost your job because you lied about my interview performance and violated company ethics policies. You damaged your own reputation by filing false complaints and launching public attacks. I didn't cause any of those consequences. You did." "Don't you dare try to gaslight me!" Her voice rose, echoing off the concrete walls of the parking garage. "I know exactly what happened. You manipulated the situation from the beginning. You probably planned this whole thing, knowing it would get me fired and clear the way for your promotion." The delusion was complete. Charlotte had rewritten history so thoroughly that she genuinely believed I was responsible for orchestrating my own hiring and her subsequent downfall. No amount of evidence or logic would penetrate the narrative she had constructed to protect herself from acknowledging her own destructive choices. "Charlotte, there are recordings of my interview. There's documentation of every lie you told about me. The Ethics Council investigated everything and found no evidence supporting any of your claims. How can you still believe that I'm the one who did something wrong?" "Because I know you, Stella. I know how you operate. You've always been jealous of what I accomplished, and you finally found a way to tear me down." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice remained hard and accusatory. "Jealous of what? Charlotte, you were barely considered for promotions at Morrison & Associates. Your performance reviews were mediocre at best. The strategic director position was never realistically within your reach, and you know it." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stepped backward, her face cycling through shock, hurt, and finally settling on rage. "How dare you say that to me? I worked at that company for 4 years. I gave them everything. I was loyal, dedicated, and professional. And they were ready to throw it all away for someone who'd been unemployed for months. They hired the most qualified candidate, Charlotte. That's how employment is supposed to work. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? The brilliant little sister with her fancy ideas and her natural talent. Well, let me tell you something. You didn't earn that position. You got lucky, and you got help from people who felt sorry for you. The contempt in her voice revealed something I had never fully understood before. This wasn't just about professional competition or sibling rivalry. Charlotte genuinely believed that any success I achieved was somehow illegitimate, that my accomplishments were diminishing her own worth. Charlotte, why did you really sabotage my interview? Not the excuses about company loyalty or protecting them from a bad hire. What was the real reason? She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. The defensive anger gave way to something rawer and more honest. Because it wasn't fair, she whispered. I followed all the rules. I worked my way up slowly, professionally, the right way. And you were going to just skip ahead of me like none of that mattered. Like my years of dedication and sacrifice meant nothing. So you decided to destroy my chances rather than compete fairly. I decided to protect what I had worked for. But somehow you turned that against me, made me the villain and convinced everyone that I was the problem. Charlotte, you filed false reports about my interview. You lied to company leadership about what I said. How is that not the problem? I told them what they needed to hear to make the right decision. You weren't ready for that level of responsibility. You would have failed, and it would have reflected poorly on the entire department. The rationalization was breathtaking in its self-serving logic. Charlotte had convinced herself that her lies were actually a form of professional wisdom, that sabotaging me had been an act of corporate responsibility rather than personal vendetta. And when I succeeded in the role? When the campaigns I developed exceeded expectations and the team performance improved under my leadership? How does that fit your narrative about my incompetence? She had no answer for that, but I could see her struggling to find one. The cognitive dissonance of her beliefs, crashing against observable reality, was written across her face. Charlotte, I want to understand something. Do you actually believe the things you're saying, or do you know you're lying and just don't care? The question seemed to break something inside her. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time since I'd known her, Charlotte looked genuinely defeated. I don't know anymore, she admitted quietly. I've been telling myself these stories for so long that I can't tell what's real and what I need to be true. It was the first honest thing she had said to me in months, and it gave me a glimpse of the sister I remembered, the one who had been capable of vulnerability and self-reflection. Charlotte, you're not a bad person, but you made terrible choices. You let your fear of being overshadowed turn you into someone who would sabotage family, and then you compounded those choices by refusing to take responsibility for them. I can't take it back, she said, tears finally spilling over. Even if I wanted to, I can't undo what I did. And I don't know how to live with being the kind of person who would do these things. You start by admitting what you did, not just to me, but to yourself. You stop looking for ways to blame other people for your choices, and you figure out how to rebuild your life based on who you want to be going forward, not who you've been. What if I can't? What if this is just who I am now? Then you'll keep destroying relationships and opportunities until you have nothing left. But I don't believe that's inevitable, Charlotte. I think you're capable of change if you genuinely want it. We stood in silence for several minutes, the weight of everything that had happened settling between us. I could see Charlotte processing what I had said, struggling with concepts that challenged everything she had been telling herself for months. Stella, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you hate me? The question caught me off guard. I had been angry, disappointed, betrayed, and hurt. But hate? That required a level of sustained emotional investment that I wasn't sure I still possessed. No, Charlotte. I don't hate you. I'm profoundly sad about what you chose to do and what it cost both of us. I'm angry about the lies and the attacks, and the months of harassment. But I don't hate you. Do you think we can ever fix this? Our relationship, I mean. I had been dreading this question because I knew my answer would hurt her, but she deserved honesty after months of deception and manipulation. I don't know. Trust isn't something you can just decide to rebuild. It has to be earned through consistent actions over time. And right now, I'm not sure you understand what those actions would need to look like. What would I need to do? You'd need to publicly acknowledge that your complaints against me were false. You'd need to apologize not just to me, but to Morrison and associates for the disruption you caused. You'd need to demonstrate through your behavior that you've genuinely changed, not just that you regret getting caught. And if I did all that, then maybe, eventually, we could find a way to be family again. But it would be a different relationship than what we had before. I'll never again trust you with information that could be used against me professionally or personally. Charlotte nodded slowly, seeming to understand the magnitude of what rebuilding our relationship would require. I need to think about all of this, she said finally. I need to figure out who I want to be and whether I'm strong enough to do the work that would require. Take the time you need, Charlotte, but I understand that my life has moved forward. I'm not waiting for you to decide whether you want to take responsibility for your actions. I'm building a career and relationships based on trust and integrity, and I won't compromise those principles to accommodate your continued denial. I understand. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at me. Stella, for what it's worth, I am sorry. Maybe not in all the ways I should be, but I am sorry that things turned out this way. I'm sorry too, Charlotte. Sorry that you felt so threatened by my success that you thought destroying me was your only option. Sorry that you chose lies over honest competition. And sorry that we lost what we had as sisters. She walked away without another word, leaving me alone in the parking garage with the echo of 3 months of family destruction and professional vindication. I sat in my car for a long time before driving home, processing the conversation and what it might mean for any possibility of future reconciliation. Charlotte's admission that she couldn't distinguish between reality and her self-serving narratives was both heartbreaking and illuminating. She had created such an elaborate justification for her behavior that dismantling it would require rebuilding her entire sense of self. Whether she was capable of that kind of fundamental change remained to be seen. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I had seen glimpses of genuine remorse rather than just self-pity and blame-shifting. That night, I called Jessica to update her on the encounter. How did she seem? Still convinced that she's the victim in all this? She was different, more honest about her motivations, and she acknowledged that she can't tell anymore what's real and what she needs to believe. It felt like the first genuine conversation we've had in months. Do you think she'll actually do the work to change? I honestly don't know. Change is hard under the best circumstances, and Charlotte would be starting from a place where she's lost her job, her reputation, and her family relationships. The easy path is to keep blaming everyone else and avoid the painful work of self-examination. But there's a chance? There's always a chance, Jessica, but I'm not going to rebuild my life around that possibility. I've learned too much about the importance of protecting myself from people who would hurt me, even family members. As I hung up the phone, I reflected on how much I had changed through this experience. 3 months ago, I would have been willing to sacrifice my own interests to preserve family harmony. Now I understood that some relationships could only be preserved by people who were committed to honesty and mutual respect. Charlotte would have to decide whether she was capable of becoming that kind of person. But regardless of her choice, I had already decided who I was going to be going forward. 6 months after our parking garage confrontation, I was reviewing quarterly performance reports in my office when Margaret Chen knocked on my door with an expression I couldn't quite read. Stella, I have something unusual to show you. We received a formal letter today that I think you should see before we decide how to respond. She handed me an envelope with Morrison & Associates' address, written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Inside was a 3-page letter on personal stationery, written in Charlotte's careful script. Dear Morrison & Associates Leadership Team, it began. I am writing to formally acknowledge and apologize for my conduct during the hiring process for the Strategic Marketing Director position in June of this year. I looked up at Margaret, surprised. She actually did it. Keep reading. It gets more comprehensive. The letter detailed Charlotte's sabotage attempts with specificity that was both painful and relieving to read. She acknowledged filing false reports about my interview performance, admitted to providing misleading information about my qualifications to the hiring committee, and took full responsibility for the disruption her actions had caused to the company's normal hiring procedures. I understand that my behavior violated fundamental principles of professional ethics and integrity, she wrote. My actions were motivated by personal disappointment and jealousy rather than legitimate concerns about candidate qualifications. Ms. Richardson's subsequent performance has clearly demonstrated that she was the right choice for this position, and my attempts to prevent her hiring were both unprofessional and wrong. The letter went on to apologize specifically to me, to the hiring committee members who had been misled by her reports, and to the company for the time and resources spent investigating her false claims. I do not expect forgiveness, nor do I expect this apology to repair the damage I caused, the letter concluded. I am sharing this acknowledgement because accepting responsibility for my actions is necessary for my own healing and growth, and because the people I wronged deserve to hear the truth stated clearly and without qualification. I set the letter down, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that Charlotte had finally acknowledged reality. Sadness that it had taken 6 months and complete professional destruction for her to reach this point. And uncertainty about what this meant for any possibility of rebuilding our relationship. What's the company's plan for responding to this? I asked Margaret. That's partly why I'm here. Thomas wants to know if you have any preferences about how we handle this. We could simply acknowledge receipt, or we could respond more substantively if you think that would be appropriate. I thought about Charlotte's situation. Unemployed, facing legal consequences for her ethics council violations, and probably dealing with significant family pressure to make amends. This letter represented a genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but it also served her interests by potentially mitigating some of the professional consequences she was facing. I think a brief acknowledgement would be appropriate, something that recognizes her willingness to take responsibility without necessarily offering absolution for the disruption she caused. I'll draft something for Thomas's review. There's one other thing, though. Charlotte also included a separate note asking if she could speak with you directly. She says she understands if you're not willing, but she wanted to request the opportunity. I stared out my office window at the Seattle skyline, considering whether I was ready for another conversation with Charlotte. Our last encounter had ended with her expressing a need to figure out who she wanted to be, and this letter suggested she had made some progress in that self-examination. Tell her I'm willing to meet for coffee next week. Somewhere public. Somewhere neutral. But I want to be clear that this conversation doesn't commit me to anything beyond listening to what she has to say. 3 days later, I sat across from Charlotte in a busy downtown cafe, studying the changes in her appearance and demeanor. She looked healthier than she had in the parking garage, less desperate, more centered. Her clothing was simple but professional, and she made consistent eye contact rather than the shifty defensive glances of our previous encounter. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," she said, her voice steady and genuine. "I know I haven't earned the right to ask for your time. I appreciated your letter to the company. It must have been difficult to write. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was also necessary. I've been in therapy for the past 4 months, working through the patterns of thinking that led me to make such destructive choices. Writing that letter was part of accepting responsibility rather than just feeling sorry for myself. The mention of therapy was encouraging. It suggested Charlotte was taking seriously the work of understanding and changing her behavior, rather than just seeking quick forgiveness. "What have you learned about yourself through that process?" Charlotte was quiet for a moment, clearly choosing her words carefully. "I learned that I've been operating from a scarcity mindset for most of my adult life, believing that other people's success somehow diminished my own worth. When you were offered the position I wanted, it felt like proof that I wasn't good enough, wasn't valuable enough, wasn't deserving enough. And instead of competing fairly or accepting that outcome, you tried to tear me down. Yes, because in my distorted thinking, destroying your opportunity felt like protecting my own sense of worth. But all it actually did was prove that I really wasn't the kind of person who deserved that position. Her self-awareness was striking, and I found myself cautiously hopeful that she was engaging in genuine self-reflection rather than just saying what she thought I wanted to hear. Charlotte, I need to ask you something directly. Do you actually understand now that you were wrong, or are you just apologizing because the consequences became too painful to bear? 6 months ago, I would have given you the answer I thought you wanted to hear. Today, I can tell you that I genuinely understand how wrong I was. Not just tactically, not just that my plan backfired, but morally. I violated every principle of fairness, honesty, and family loyalty that I claim to value. What's changed for you personally? Beyond the apologies and acknowledgments? I'm learning to find my sense of worth from my own actions and growth rather than from comparing myself to other people. I'm working on a small marketing consulting practice, building it slowly and ethically, and I'm volunteering with a nonprofit that helps people transition back into the workforce after making significant mistakes. The consulting practice was a practical step toward rebuilding her professional life, but the volunteer work suggested a deeper commitment to understanding the impact of destructive choices. How do you handle it when you see my success? When you hear about the campaigns I'm developing or the recognition I'm receiving? It's still hard sometimes, she admitted. But I'm learning to see your success as evidence that good work gets rewarded rather than as a threat to my own potential. Your achievements don't make me less capable or less valuable. We talked for over an hour, covering everything from Charlotte's therapy insights to her plans for rebuilding her career, to her hopes for eventually repairing our family relationships. Throughout the conversation, she demonstrated a level of self-awareness and accountability that I hadn't seen from her before. Stella, I know I can't undo the damage I caused, and I know that trust has to be rebuilt slowly through consistent actions. But I want you to know that I'm committed to becoming someone worthy of your respect again, even if that takes years. What does that look like practically, Charlotte? How do I know this isn't just another manipulation designed to get me to lower my guard? You'll know because I'm not asking for anything from you. I'm not asking you to help with my career, or to vouch for me with former colleagues, or to pretend this never happened for the sake of family harmony. I'm just asking for the chance to demonstrate through my actions that I've genuinely changed. And if I decide I'm not ready to rebuild our relationship, then I'll respect that decision and continue working on myself regardless. My growth can't be dependent on your forgiveness, or it's not really growth. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Charlotte handed me a small wrapped package. This is for you. It's not an attempt to buy forgiveness, just something I wanted you to have. Inside was a framed photograph from our childhood, the two of us building a sandcastle at a family beach vacation. We couldn't have been more than 8 and 11, grinning at the camera with sandy hands and sun-bleached hair. I found this when I was going through old photos, trying to remember who we used to be before career pressures and adult competition complicated everything. I wanted you to have it as a reminder that our relationship wasn't always based on rivalry and resentment. The photograph hit me emotionally in a way I hadn't expected. Looking at our younger selves, I could see the genuine affection and partnership that had characterized our early relationship. Before professional insecurities and family dynamics had turned us into competitors rather than allies. Thank you, Charlotte. I'll treasure this. I hope someday we can build something like that again. Not the same, we're different people now, but something based on love and support rather than competition and fear. Over the following months, Charlotte proved her commitment to change through consistent actions rather than grand gestures. She sent periodic updates about her consulting work, and volunteer activities, never asking for anything in return. She attended family events when invited, but didn't push for private conversations or special consideration. Most importantly, when people in our professional network asked her about our situation, she consistently took responsibility for what had happened rather than offering qualified apologies or shared blame. A year after our coffee meeting, Charlotte's consulting practice had grown to the point where she was considering hiring an assistant. Her volunteer work had expanded to include mentoring other professionals who were rebuilding careers after ethical failures. And she had begun dating someone, a fellow volunteer who knew her complete history and respected her commitment to personal growth. At our cousin Jessica's wedding, we found ourselves sitting together during the reception, watching other family members dance and celebrate. "How are things with your business?" I asked, genuinely curious about her progress. "Good. Challenging, but good. I'm working with smaller clients than I used to dream about, but the work is honest, and I'm building something sustainable based on actual value rather than politics or connections." "That sounds fulfilling." "It is. And Stella, I want you to know, your success at Morrison & Associates has been inspiring to watch. The campaigns you've developed, the team culture you've built, the industry recognition you've received. You've proven that talent and integrity really do get rewarded when you give them enough time and opportunity. Thank you. That means more coming from you than you might realize." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching our family celebrate and remembering all the occasions we had shared before everything went wrong. "Charlotte, I need to tell you something. I'm proud of the work you've done to rebuild yourself. The person you've become over this past year is someone I can respect and trust. And while I can't forget what happened between us, I'm ready to build something new based on who we are now." "Does that mean we're sisters again?" "We never stopped being sisters, Charlotte, but now we're sisters who understand the importance of honesty, accountability, and treating each other with the respect we both deserve." As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave the wedding, Charlotte hugged me with the unself-conscious affection I remembered from our childhood. "Thank you for giving me the chance to earn my way back into your life, Stella. I know how much courage that required after everything I put you through. Thank you for doing the work to become someone worth that chance." 2 years later, I was offered a senior executive position at a larger marketing firm in Portland. As I considered whether to accept the promotion and relocate, I found myself calling Charlotte for advice, something I never thought would happen again. "It sounds like an incredible opportunity," she said after I'd outlined the position details. "Are you hesitant because of the move, or because of something about the role itself?" "Both, honestly. Seattle feels like home now, and Morrison & Associates has been so supportive of my growth. But this new position would be a significant step up in terms of responsibility and industry influence. What does your gut tell you?" "That I should take the risk. That growth requires stepping outside comfort zones even when the current situation is working well." "Then I think you should do it. You've proven that you can succeed anywhere, with any team, in any situation. And Portland's close enough that we can still see each other regularly." Her support felt genuine and unqualified, free from the competitive undertones that had characterized our interactions for so many years. I accepted the Portland position and moved that fall. Charlotte helped me pack my apartment, and we spent the drive down the coast talking about our hopes for the future and our gratitude for the relationship we had built from the ashes of our previous dynamic. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Charlotte said as we crossed the Oregon border. "What?" "That we figured out how to be family again without pretending the hard parts never happened. We didn't just forgive and forget. We learned and grew and chose each other again." "You're right. We're stronger now than we ever were before, because we know we can survive the worst of each other and still choose to build something good." At my farewell party from Morrison & Associates, Thomas Morrison pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Stella, I've been thinking about something as you prepare for this transition. The situation with your sister taught all of us important lessons about ethics, accountability, and the importance of truth in professional relationships. But it also demonstrated something powerful about resilience and the possibility of redemption. How so? Watching Charlotte take responsibility for her actions and rebuild her reputation through consistent ethical behavior has been remarkable. And seeing you maintain your principles while still leaving room for people to grow and change has been inspiring for our entire leadership team. I learned that holding people accountable and giving them opportunities to change aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. Exactly. And that's a lesson that will serve you well in senior leadership positions. The ability to be both firm and fair, demanding and forgiving, principled and practical. As I settled into my new role in Portland, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought me to this point. What had begun as professional sabotage had ultimately led to career advancement, personal growth, and a stronger family relationship than I had ever thought possible. Charlotte and I now talked weekly, sharing professional challenges and celebrating each other's successes. She had become one of my most trusted advisors, precisely because she understood the cost of compromising integrity and was committed to never making those mistakes again. The experience had taught me that some betrayals are so profound they permanently change relationships. But that doesn't always mean ending them. Sometimes it means rebuilding them on more honest, more resilient foundations. Most importantly, I learned that my worth wasn't diminished by other people's attempts to tear me down, and my success wasn't dependent on anyone else's failure. There was room for both Charlotte and me to succeed, to grow, and to support each other's dreams. Once we stopped viewing life as a zero-sum competition and started seeing it as an opportunity for mutual flourishing. And that, ultimately, was the greatest victory of all. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.